We
Oh,
just
you
got a
can't
good
tell.
response on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, I could tell if I stuck around, but I don't want to do that. But so we'll just go straight into it. Quick question before we start. There was no was there was no There we go. Okay, so that's working. We Before, when Jefferson sent the Marines after the Barbary pirates in 1800, whenever that was,
Yeah,
he
1803. Yeah,
1803, right? There was not an authorization by Congress for that, was there? That was purely executive action.
not initially. They passed a law saying that they could go on a training exercise.
Well, that's an even better congressional dodge than
Yeah,
usual.
yeah.
All right. Well,
So,
we
so
can.
my question then, John, is why doesn't Pete Hegseth issue
Well,
letters of marque and reprisal?
oh, Congress does that, right? That's a
I don't think
congressional
he.
power.
Yeah, he actually it's up to Congress. Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, but he
but
could
doesn't
recommend it
need
to Congress.
Yeah, yeah, he
All
could.
right.
But
We
yeah,
are live streaming
yeah.
and we are
Oh,
recording, so we should just start, Lucretia. And as you know, I
Okay.
was always saying, don't leave it in the green room. So,
okay. I can't ever tell when we're recording, and now I know that that people out there are listening, even if we're not formally started. So they'll get it. It just doesn't make it onto the audio. Okay.
Thank
So,
God.
welcome everyone in 3, 2. Welcome everyone to this special edition of the Three Whiskey Happy Hour because we're all together at our usual spots and able to drink alcohol because it is a decent time for drinking alcohol. But John, those of you who have live feed or watching the video, just got out of the shower and didn't bother to pick up a bottle of whiskey on his way from the shower. Did you, John? So I
No,
actually.
I know, Mr. Lucretia in your household has them strategically placed every 50 feet so that you're never far from a bottle of scotch.
That's my house is small enough that you're probably right, but I am prepared to cover down for you on both.
yeah. So wait. So John, I mean, you're at the Olympic Club. Is that what you said?
I'm at the Olympic, a famous club in San Francisco, which pre-existed gyms at universities, so people would train for the Olympics at places like this.
You're starting to remind me of Lance Azumi a little bit, who is this Japanese guy who is very British, right? He goes to Scottish games, presides over Scotch whiskey tastings, and I swear
he doesn't drink.
And doesn't. I mean, he's a spiritual Scotsman, and you're
what?
the most.
Okay, he's got a lot of. First, he's got a lot of problems because he wants to be someone else, but then he wants to be Scottish. That's his big problem.
Well, my point is, you are the most clubbable person I know. I'm hard pressed to think of a club that you don't belong to.
I love clubs.
See,
I love them. What's so bad about them? I hate
I don't
hotels.
belong to any clubs, John. You know why, don't you? Because I wouldn't belong to anyone that would have me as a member.
Right.
No, it's just you because you give them my name whenever you go in one and they let you in for free.
That is true. I've been to more than one that on your coattails, John.
Yeah, right.
Enough. So, how are you gentlemen this evening?
Well, I am good. I am. Last week I mentioned my discovery of Kilkerran. I keep getting different. I was chastised by listeners that I was pronouncing it wrong, and I looked it up on the internet, so it must be true that it's Kilkerran or Kilkerran. There's disputes about this, but anyway, that's what I'm drinking, and it's great.
Is it from Scotland?
When I get back to Scotch.
Yeah, this is. I was telling you last week. It's the one I got at Spirits and Spices there in Connecticut Avenue, and heavily peated, so that
I'm amazed
Lucretia
you still have the bottle left, Steve.
Well, I got 2 of them. How do you know?
Oh, that's why. I am drinking Scotch old enough to vote again, so people will stop accusing me of those horrible things like being a cougar. And it's lovely, but I'm going to finish my wine first. So we are very happy to be here. My theme for tonight, and I almost forgot to put them on till the last minute, is that the Three Whiskey Happy Hour will not engage in pearl clutching like the rest of the damn world has been over practically everything this week. And it's been driving me crazy. The most made up controversies on the planet cause people to hyperventilate and need their fans and have, their smelling salts. Starting with.
Well, we mean we're getting a bout of fake news? Is that what you're saying? And what if those pearls were on the dead bodies of drug runners we're killing in the Caribbean? I would clutch those pearls and take them to the jeweler. But okay.
I don't know if I'd want to touch them, but I'm not that desperate. I got 4 strands of them, so I'll leave them there. We have to go way back ancient history. There was an election last week on Tuesday. Today is Thursday, and the whole world has gone crazy 4 times around since Tuesday. But on Tuesday, the Republican won in a Republican district. The Republican that President Trump and Mike Johnson both endorsed. But everybody is clutching their pearls over the fact that he only won by 9 points. And this is proof that the Republicans are done for. They are toast in the 2026 midterms. Everybody is saying so, even on the right. Or am I wrong?
No, I'm actually Henry Olsen, who is normally kind of gloomy about these things. He wrote that Republicans should be worried about the election, but this was not the portent of doom that so many people are saying. And he does the typical Henry Olsen run through the numbers about it. So, and you can usually, as I say, take.
We lost him. John, can you hear me still?
Yes, Steve's frozen.
Okay, so Henry does. I'll try to finish Steve's sentence, although I don't know exactly what Henry has said about it. But there you are. We lost you through that whole thing, Steve.
Yeah, darn it. I'm having internet problems here. All right, let me start again. I think there are 2 takeaways. One is the Democrats nominated an insane woman. She makes
still
AOC
47% of the vote.
Well, yes, but 45. The point is she might have won if they nominated a sensible person. But the Democrats like to nominate crazy people. The other thing is it was a district that Trump won by 22 points. So there's some considerable erosion there. But the third thing is the polls showed it within 2 or 3 points, and the guy won by like 8 or 9. So I think that everybody should calm down. It's going to be, could be a tough year for Republicans next year, depending on circumstances. But turnout will improve when you have a general election in November of next year. So everybody calm down and quit clutching your pearls.
What do you think, John?
I agree. It's too far out to really tell. On the other hand, it would not be strange for the president to lose a lot of seats at the midterm elections. And so if they lose the House majority, I wouldn't be surprised. What I would be surprised about would be if the Republicans lost the Senate majority, because there are very, very few. I think maybe there are almost no vulnerable Republicans up in the midterm. So there would have to be a real wave for Republicans to lose the Senate.
Yeah. Is Susan Collins considered at all vulnerable in Maine?
I believe the governor is running against her. I mean, they got a high quality candidate to run against her, but she always seems to pull it out at the end.
They haven't had the primary yet. Remember, it's the Nazi tattoo guy who's actually way ahead of the governor in the Democratic primary. So who knows? I just wondered.
Look, 6 years ago, well, 5 years ago, but the last time Collins was up, all the reputable polls had her trailing by 8 to 10 points, and she won by 5 points. So Maine is a peculiar state. I would bet on her to be reelected.
One of the things I want to throw one thing out there, and that was that something we've talked about before. The Republican ground game in some of these places is pitiful. Republicans don't seem to have the same organizations, grassroots efforts, tons of money poured into those grassroots efforts and so on. And they tend to act like establishment Republicans and not necessarily, especially those not affiliated with the national Trump organization. They want to do politics the old way. I don't know if that's true, if that had anything to do with why that woman came as close as she did. And she was you're right, a total nut job. Oh my God. And then my favorite thing was, she said she hated country music and she hated Nashville. And she shows up at her victory party, which turned out, of course, to be the defeat party, in this god awful thing that you couldn't have gotten Roseanne Cash to wear in 1963. It was the ugliest country western glittery. It was horrendous. And that kind of pandering just makes me laugh. I don't know what else to say.
Well, there you go again with your lookism. The turnout thing is something I know a little bit about, not from so much direct experience, but from old experience. So I think you know this. My dad, back in the late 60s and early 70s, was on the Los Angeles County Republican Central Committee. He was elected. That was an elected office back then. And my dad in 1960, I love to brag about this. My dad in 1968 beat a Rockefeller Republican incumbent. The guy's name was Richard Riordan. Isn't that funny, right? My dad beat him by 8. Oh, sorry, this is worth a detour. My dad beat him by, I think, 12 votes in the initial count. And Riordan, rich guy always, he paid for a recount for a stupid little party office, which is insane. Wow. And the recount, I think, had my dad up by 16 votes or something ridiculous. So, but the point is that at a number of special elections in those years, my dad, who, had a business to run and, lots of stuff to do, he was also on the school board in my hometown at the same time. But when they'd have these special elections, they'd look up and say, oh, that's a Democratic district for Congress or a state legislative seat, and it's a Democratic district by 2 or 3 points. I'll bet we can steal it if we organize a really good get out the vote drive. And they did in a couple of cases, but it's very much, they had a good candidate in one race I remember in particular. But the point is that it was kind of ad hoc, and that's kind of the way the Republicans do it. The last election you heard, Trump is going to outsource voter turnout to Turning Point USA. And I thought, oh dear, I'm not sure that's a good idea, but I think it turned out to be a very good idea because Kirk and his organization really did turn out the young people and all the rest of that. The Democrats, though, you're right, they have, the George Soros funded and the labor unions and the others, they have a turnout machine that goes back decades. It works like clockwork. And our team is more ad hoc and inconsistent, but we know how to do it if we put our minds to it.
So I have a confession. First of all, I went door to door canvassing for Bob Dole. How embarrassing is that? 96.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. This Lucretia thing's all an act.
Well, I was a little bit naive back in those days, but even back then, I remember thinking, why the hell would somebody do this? Either they're going to vote for Bob Dole or they're going to vote for Bill Clinton. There's no convincing them. Everybody's made up their mind. This is the way I project my own. I project my own moral certainty and political certainty onto the rest of the world. The other day, I was talking with, we shall call him a blue-collar worker, heavy-set Mexican guy who was moving furniture for me at the university, taking old furniture out and so forth. And somehow the subject of the military base came up, and the university says, well, the university has to hate this place because of the military base and all that stuff about shooting fishermen out of the water and who did they, and he just went on and he said, and Gaza, he said, Israel's only been there for 200 years and Palestine's been there since the beginning of time. And
oh my God.
and this guy's moving my furniture. So I'm just kind of, well, no, Israel actually hasn't even been there. The modern Israel's only been there since 1948. But then again, Palestine, but he didn't care. And I thought, okay, there are a lot of really stupid people out there who only get their news from one side, and they I don't know. Anyway, it was eye-opening to me at my ripe old age of 65 that there was anybody who could be that dumb that passionate about it.
I thought you were bringing up was personal contact with the voters. This is something I'm amazed has not been more carefully studied by political scientists who like to count things and run regression models. Because if you go back to, for example, 1968, the Clean for Gene kids who cut their hair and shaved their beards and descended on New Hampshire had a lot to do with Gene McCarthy almost defeating Lyndon Johnson and driving him out of the race. And I could give several examples. Now, they're anecdotal, except I know of some candidates who won because they knocked on 10,000 doors and met the voters face to face. And you know what? People like to be asked for their vote. They'd love it from the candidate, but if they have volunteers who aren't crazy and, nut jobs who are, you'd be surprised how many votes you get do it. And in a close legislative or congressional race, I think that can make a difference. And as I say,
there's a woman I knew in Sacramento, Steve, who nobody came out of nowhere and knocked on and her at the end of her campaign. I remember the front of the Sacramento Bee showed her with her shoe.
Yep.
Holding her shoe that had a hole in the sole of it, that she'd walked so far and knocked on so many doors, and she won.
Was that Barbara Albee? I'm thinking. Well, she was the legendary person, and never mind.
It doesn't matter.
It's also the case that most voters, there's a huge block of independents and people who are uncertain.
Yeah.
They don't make up their minds until,
Yeah.
2-3 weeks before the election, if that. And so they could be persuaded by the
Yeah.
personal touch.
Right.
Isn't that more?
Absolutely.
And Republicans, for that matter.
We theorists like Lucretia and me, or law professors like you, don't tend to think in those sort of, grassroots types things. And I'm amazed that political scientists haven't studied that more closely, because I'm convinced that.
I thought they did. They haven't. Wow.
I don't think so. Not very much.
A lot of people
I
don't
can't
pay
even
attention
imagine
to
changing my
politics.
vote.
Well, I
for
do
that,
know.
but-
I do know of one study done a few years ago by a UCLA graduate student, and it was about. I wrote this up at Powerline at the time, 10 years ago now. It's a graduate student who had said, "Oh, people door knocking against same-sex marriage initiative in California, whatever that was in 2008. They made a huge difference." Turned out the guy had made up all of his data, and the study was retracted. So there you go.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, another clutching moment. Brian Cole, Brian Cole Jr. has been named as the J6 bomber planter guy. And when it first came out, this is a short time period, by the way, folks. It was everywhere on every news channel, all across social media, that the guy was a white supremacist. It turns out, when they finally released the picture of which Brian Cole Jr. they were talking about, and the actual person, he happens to be a black guy who's a leftist anarchist sociopath. That's the latest.
Who like maybe lives in his parents' basement. I mean, he's from a
He
nice
does live
looking.
with his parents.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
His
Right.
mom's
Really?
one of those radical. She's a what's Barack Obama's mother's name? What was her name?
I forget now, but I know
Whatever
what
it
you
is,
mean.
the proud of the fact that she. And so
right.
she's a white woman and says the white people should be embarrassed about how racist white people are. And so anyway, sorry. All of this came out in the last couple of hours.
I think the interesting question to me is, it will be, by the way, I have a running theme for several of your items here, Lucretia, and I'm going to hold it for a couple more of them. But I'll hint at it by saying one question to me is how the media is going to report this, not just the accuracy of the person and his anarchist ties or whatever, but is someone going to ask, why did it take the Trump FBI to reopen this investigation in a serious way? Why did the Biden people simply ignore this question, which apparently they did? At least that's the early reporting about it, is that the Trump FBI reopened it and devoted resources to finding this person. There was a
lot
mistake.
of iffy things.
Sure, right.
Yeah. Julie Kelly's been sort of dogged about all of this. I don't follow every single thing she does, but there are just a lot of inconsistencies. But if they actually had some sense of who this person was, it's clear why they didn't come out and if they knew who he was way back when, or because of the inconsistencies in the whole situation, what they did about Kamala Harris once they found the bomb was there, and some other weird things that happened. I don't remember all of it. They just didn't want to get to the bottom of it. They were too busy chasing after grandmas who walked into the Capitol, I guess. That's the pat line we say. Who knows if we'll ever hear the whole story on it.
Yeah.
John, you're the non-conspiracy theorist here.
I wear that title proudly, yes. But I don't think you don't really think the FBI under Biden covered this up. I mean, the reports it just looks like they had to. I was reading one of the reports said the link was they had to go through 200,000 purchases of a certain kind of blasting cap. Is that right? To find this guy, and it just took
3 million
enormous
cell phone
numbers of
records.
manpower. Yeah, it just took enormous manpower to to correlate all the data.
But they
This
did
is
drop
why
the case.
I bet AI could have caught
Well-
him in 5 minutes, I guess.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know if we know that they dropped the case, but I'm sure it was a low priority. And if they look, the things that were done in the last few months to find this guy could have been done 4 years ago, but weren't. And I think there's a legitimate question as to why. So
Mhm.
I make no assumptions on what happened, but simply saying that's a question that should be asked
No,
by
but
the
I-
media and congressional committees.
Yeah, I
So,
could totally see the Biden Justice Department thinking and saying, I don't know if they said it in public, but I'm sure they said convicting the people who broke into the Capitol on January 6th is a higher priority There are more of them. They're violent. We see they're on tape. It's easier to prosecute them than, finding this one needle in a haystack guy. I could see them saying that. And then the American people could decide whether they like that when they, had the last election, which they did.
Yeah. Well, the violence, I will remind you, was much more one-sided against the 5 people who died as a result of the FBI and the Capitol Police. But we'll just change the subject and move on to, another very controversial subject. I got quite a few reports about you, John.
What happened?
What you said
You're
on
in trouble now.
CNN.
Oh,
On
yeah.
CNN, it came across Twitter to me. Biting in hook, line, and sinker on the faulty Washington Post reporting on what happened in the double tap strike of the Venezuelan boat on September 2nd, and very upset with you for getting your news from the Washington Post before the whole story came out. So
Well,
here's
that's what
your
you say every
opportunity.
week. Okay.
Here's your opportunity.
If the facts in the story are true, and I did make a point of saying we don't know what the facts are, but if they're true, you can't give an order of no quarter and no survivors, right? That's pretty clear. And I said, so anybody who gave such an order would be illegal and no one would be able to carry it out. But I did say, I have no idea what happened. I'm not sure even after the hearings today, we know exactly what happened. So what I saw in the New York Times,
Yeah.
I know.
which actually
Go
has been
figure.
contradicting, which actually has
Correct.
been almost calling the Post, as Steve said, almost saying the Post has been lying.
Yep.
The New York Times said, it's very interesting. If you look at the Post and Times stories today about Admiral Bradley's testimony, the Post almost doesn't repeat what is the most important fact. That Admiral Bradley testified that no one gave any order saying no quarter, no survivors.
Yeah.
That really is the most important thing in the whole story, because if Admiral Bradley didn't receive that order, then all the stuff about Hegseth turns out to be made up. And then it really is just a question of, and Admiral Bradley didn't think he was carrying out any order like that. Then all of it really boils down to is, did Admiral Bradley exercise the proper military discretion when he ordered a second strike on the boat? That's not an outright violation of the laws of war.
Yeah.
Like an order saying no survivors would be.
Yeah. So this smacks to me, Lucretia, I'm with you. This smacks to me as I won't say a contrived story, but somehow this idea got out that Hegseth had made this order. The media and Democrats are out to get Hegseth, and so they ran with it, and the Post ran with it as the Post did with other hoaxes. Post hoaxes. That would be a great breakfast cereal. Would just be, I'll think what goes in it. But look, the interesting thing, though, is the New York Times contradicting it. Usually the New York Times goes all in for the attack dog stories against Republicans. And this is curious. And I'll just speculate here. There's a couple of possible motives. One is that the New York Times, and by the way, I give other examples in other areas, the New York Times is actually trying to do a better job of journalism because they realize they got way out of whack. But it's also possible that they have it in for the Washington Post, because the Post is the other rival of the authoritative political newspaper. And the Washington Post is moving to the right in its editorial pages, not its news pages. And maybe the Times says
controls it.
Well, right. And he said, I want to, and they have been hiring people, they've been firing crazy people and hiring sensible people. I think it still isn't, coherent yet. But that's an interest, and maybe the Times wants to punish the Post for deviating from the editorial party line. I don't know; those are just speculations. But I thought that was very interesting that the New York Times was out so firmly with a different account of things that repudiated the Post account, and I haven't seen that for a long time.
I'm sure the Times tried to confirm the story, and they would have been more than happy to print a story that said we found the same things out as the Post. But instead, they got denial after denial. In fact, they couldn't find a single person, involved with the mission who verified the Post's account. So
well, remember, as usual, the Post account
that's why I said on the CNN show, only if the facts in the Post story are true, and we're still waiting to find out what happened.
You know what the problem with that, John, is? And I don't mean this as a slam on you in any way, shape, or form, but if you're on CNN and parroting the line that they want you to parrot, even with all of the qualifiers, your detractors are going to get upset with you. They're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. But that being said, you have
Oh,
redeemed yourself.
I'm really upset to hear that.
Yeah, I know. I can tell you why. But you have redeemed yourself in my eyes for the moment, But I do want to say this. You guys never bought me. All the nice things I do for you, you still never bought me my Prada tinfoil hat. So I can't put it on right now. But I don't know that the Washington Post is necessarily complicit in this, but certainly wanting to push it along. Remember that the seditious six, whatever we're calling them, were really
right.
quite humiliated by the fact that they came out with this video encouraging members of the military to refuse to carry out any illegal orders, and we're just stating the law as it is, which isn't exactly accurate. But when they were pressed on the point, not one of them could name a single, even ambiguous instance where Trump had violated some law that the military should not be following. And this gave them the perfect example. I know that because that ugly, despicable POS troll, Mark Kelly, most despicable creature on the planet, looks
Your
like
favorite guy.
Gollum.
Has
come out now and
feel
said,
bad for him already.
"Oh yes," and he's on he's on more news shows than John is,
Oh.
and he shouldn't be because John's handsome and Mark Kelly looks like Gollum.
Well,
at the very end.
Can I jump in here
Wilderness.
and say that first of all, I get my tinfoil hat on. Like, I wonder if those 6 people knew that this story was in the works. That the
I bet what happened was they're enemies of Hegseth within the Pentagon, perhaps JAG attorneys, and they leaked this to follow on with the effects of that video, which, in the left-wing media is the greatest thing, right? If you listen to their echo chamber, they think it was throwing down the gauntlet to Trump and identifying outrageous violations of the rules of war. And so they think they're piling on with more momentum. I think the video encouraged some people in the uniformed military who are lawyers or civil servants in the Pentagon to exaggerate what happened and to spin it in a way that looked like Hegseth had given this order.
And John, you are so right.
You should be pissed that you've been lied to.
Yeah, you are so right that cohort within the Pentagon is usually the worst of the worst. I know quite a few of them personally, and they are they're awful. They're truly, truly awful. But that all I want to say is what Senator John Kennedy had to say about it. They've clearly exceeded the limits of their meds. But one last really quick thing about this. Back to my not so bright furniture mover guy. Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island, most narco traffickers are not in those boats. They pay people to do that. It's the way they make money.
Yeah.
I am going to leave it. If any of our listeners cannot follow my point on that one, go move to Rhode Island and vote for Jack Reed. Wow, what an idiot. Okay.
I call him Jack the Thin Reed, but yeah.
Yeah, can I make a point that there's a difference between I think the media and people are confusing two things. And I even heard some people on the National Review podcast, which I love listening to, but I found them confusing a few things that they were getting confused. What's a legitimate target in a war with how you treat people like shipwrecked people, the wounded in a war. I don't think there's any doubt if we're at war with Venezuela, those boats are legitimate targets, right? You're allowed to stop the enemy from moving around things. Like you're allowed to bomb network, train networks, communication networks, electrical networks. Why would you not be allowed to stop Venezuela from sending illegal drugs abroad and getting money back? It seems like I think people get that confused with the other question. What if you blow one up and there's survivors? What do you do with the survivors? That would be true no matter what the target is. Mm-hmm. I think people are confusing the legality of the war itself with how you fight it. And they're different questions.
I agree, but I also think that the latter question they're confusing. Um, the UN, or excuse me, the Geneva Convention says that you basically you can't do a double tap strike after you've hit something because you're not supposed to be targeting rescue workers and whatnot who come to pull the survivors out of some strike. That's I'm oversimplifying it, but I mean that's
Yeah,
certainly
actually,
the
I think
case.
it depends. You're
It
like,
depends. Yes,
yeah,
go ahead.
a lot of that's the thing. That's the thing that I find about what if it is the JAG attorneys who are leaking this. I think what they're doing is pretending that the laws of war are clear and give you bright line answers for everything beforehand. And I was talking to a reporter today. I was trying to explain the laws of war give a lot of discretion to the military, and we
As
don't
it
even
should.
have lawyers go around with police officers. We don't have this
Oh,
idea
right.
that lawyers should drive around in a police cruiser and tell the police officer beforehand, oh, that's an acceptable arrest. That's not acceptable. We train the police officers and we expect them to do their job. And then if something violates the rules, then we investigate it after. And these JAG attorneys have assumed enormous power where they sit there and they, I think, bless or veto almost every targeting decision. I don't think
Which
people realize how
supposedly happened here.
over-lawyered. Yeah, this happened here. Yeah, but it's been happening for a while. It's actually, I blame it on the Clinton. It was that way when I worked in the Justice Department. I was astounded when I worked in the Justice Department. And after 9/11, I saw the level of how much lawyering there was in basic military operations. I think that people would be shocked if they saw, just lawyers saying yes, no on every missile strike. But that's essentially what's going on now.
So 2 points. One is, I mean, look, some of these stories are well known, but American troops in the closing months of World War II committed what would now be described as war crimes. Shooting Germans that they'd captured. I think often with very good reason. I don't remember some specific incidents, but that's what happens in war, right? The other one is there's a broader story here, though, John and Lucretia, which is we have this huge flotilla of the Navy and Marines down near Venezuela, and we are, as the old saying goes, saber rattling. And we still haven't heard from Trump or anyone in the administration what exactly is going on here. I mean, we want to force Maduro out. We say that. But I do wish that someone would make the case that, which I have several times on this podcast made, that Venezuela is a bad actor, right? And we have all kinds of casus belli with them. Now, I think Trump's reluctant to because he is a non-interventionist, right? He does not want to be, the old forever wars nonsense and all the rest of that. But I do think there's a precedent here, and it goes back to my favorite president before Trump. We invaded Grenada in October of 1983, but in March of '83, Reagan gave an Oval Office address, which presidents don't do anymore, and it was all about Central America, and it was why Nicaragua was bad and why we're supporting resistance to them. And oh, by the way, why are the Cubans building a 10,000-foot runway on this little island of Grenada? Bad things are happening there, and we have to keep our eye on that too. So he telegraphed ahead of time that we've been watching bad stuff happening in Central America. And then, and by the way, after he invaded Grenada, the Nicaraguans called up our Secretary of State Schultz at the time and said, if you ever want to get Americans out of Nicaragua, just call us on the phone and we'll help. It was very effective in sending a signal. Okay.
All right. John, credit to John. He said the same thing. A little bit more intellectually solid in his. No, I don't mean it like that. What I mean is he actually provided a constitutional separation of powers explanation for why it's safe to trust the president as commander in chief to make some of these kinds of decisions, but the importance of having Congress first and foremost support that, and then by extension from Congress, public support as well. It was
it was probably when my internet was out a couple minutes ago. I'm having problems here, listeners, tonight. So you guys know what to do when I'm okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so speaking of bad things are happening, I'm going to go ahead and be, never mind a conspiracy theorist, I'm just going to be a bigot. I agree with Trump. We don't need any damn Somalis here. We don't need, I'm going to be much more serious than that. I believe that Islam is the greatest source of evil in the world, and that it is not a religion, it is an evil ideology bent on world domination. We will have to tolerate religious expressions of Islam to some extent because we have a commitment to religious freedom. And I'm
Well,
not going to be in the business of deciding what religions should get it and what shouldn't. However, there is nothing, despite stupid Richard Gere claims. The entire planet has fallen off a cliff. Do you really think these refugees and immigrants are different than us? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Our friend Jeremy Carl had a really interesting article yesterday, I think, in American Mind, probably. And he outlined all the ways in which Somali immigrants and immigrants from other Muslim countries, the things that they practice, the things that they believe in, tying up these god awful men, Islamic men, tie up little boys and make them dance and rape them and marry their 3-year-olds and beat their women to death. We could go on and on and on about all of the ways they are subhuman, barbaric, vile creatures who do not belong in Western society. We have
well,
not demanded that they assimilate.
okay.
And
Well, that's, I was going to say, I may be with John on this a little bit,
John, you got to
and make
defend
some
yourself.
distinctions. Well, no, he doesn't. I said I'm kind of,
You broke
I
up.
think, oh, I did. Sorry. I was, all right. I'll start again. I slow your roll a little bit, I think, and make some distinctions. I think you raised the crucial question, which is assimilation. And I think you can make a case that certain immigrant populations from Muslim countries have assimilated pretty well. I just remember my Pakistan.
I better pick up the
Yeah,
argument.
John, you gotta pick it up.
Zoom is vetoing Steve again. And maybe Steve might not agree with all this. So Lucretia, I do think there's an element of what you say, which is right. But I think to generalize it to all Somalis or to all Muslims, I think it goes too far. I mean, there are, I think, a record of successful assimilation in the country, people
Where?
coming from Egypt, from Lebanon, from Jordan. I mean, there are very patriotic Muslims in the United States who serve in the armed forces. You guys know we had this wonderful guy who worked at the Claremont Institute. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want him to, get all these marriage proposals. He's already married, but he was Muslim. He volunteered and served in the Marine Corps, and actually was part of the unit that retook the very village in Iraq that he was born in. Amazing. He was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. And then he went to college, and then he got admitted to the PhD program. So there are going to be good and bad people from these countries, just there are from all countries. I don't disagree with you that there may be countries that we should block all migration from if we need to vet people more who are coming from places like Somalia, right? If they are engaged in all kinds of criminal activity back in Somalia, we shouldn't be letting them in. But I don't think that being a Somali or being Muslim is, sort of prima facie a reason that someone shouldn't come to the country. There are Muslim countries, I think, that we have an interest in being allied with that are very successful, that aren't as terrible as some of the ones you described, like Indonesia, for example, I think is a country where Islam is practiced in a much more moderate way. You don't hear about these kinds of abuses there, and they're an important ally to us in the Pacific. So I wouldn't just paint with such a broad.
No, I know.
brush.
So let me defend myself a little bit because this is never the correct venue to make a sweeping statement like that and not get the subtleties in. Let me go the other way. So that idiot Fry, whatever his name is, the mayor, the police chief, their political power depends entirely now upon support from the Somali community. So they will not even tolerate anyone saying anything that might in the least bit hint at the fact that Somalis aren't, perfectly great Americans and that this whole thing about fraud is nothing but racism. You have the woman who's beat with the ugly stick, Jayapal, however you say her name. This country was built by Somalis, Indians, Latinos, and Africans. Sorry, honey. Being ugly doesn't make you right. You are so wrong about that. Now, have they contributed? Maybe. But the other side has this crazy rhetoric that refuses to allow even the most basic kind of discussion about, yeah, maybe we ought to consider stopping some of this refugee and immigration from these countries because they're not assimilating. And they're bringing their god-awful Islamic practices here to America.
Well,
honor killings and, on and on and on. And look at what's happening in Dearborn, Michigan.
No, now there you raise the key point, which is why are they not assimilating? I think there's two reasons. One is the dominance of the multicultural ethic in this country, which explains why Mayor Fry and some of these other people in Minnesota will say the ridiculous things they do. But second, when you allow populations to concentrate the way they have with Somalis in Minnesota, Arabs in very large numbers, very fast in the Dearborn, Michigan, and other places, then you prevent that from happening. Because I'm with John, there are lots of examples of successful. I think we do a better job than most countries do of assimilating. There is no assimilation in England. Well, we did. I think we still do.
France.
I mean, or France. Those are my two. Or Germany, right? None of the Europe, even the great, social democracies that our liberals love, like Denmark and Sweden. There's no assimilation going on there. We still have some of it, but it's when you have smaller numbers and when they're more widely exposed to and dispersed in the American population. That's the way it's always worked. I mean, I think of, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, my favorite Somali, right? Now, her assimilation took place in Europe, and that's, maybe an idiosyncratic story, but it shows that it can happen. I think my internet quit when I was mentioning my great Pakistani taxi driver I used to use in Washington, who was head of Muslims for Romney in 2012 on the issue of same-sex marriage. He was all for Romney because he would stop same-sex marriage.
They all fit in his taxi cab too.
well, I don't know. That's the interesting point. He'd been here a long time, came as a refugee when he was like 10 years old. So there are stories like that. I think if you do have people come at that age, it works.
I think you make a good point, though, that the Trump administration, I think, could be more successful if they married the criticism, I think very valid criticism of what's going on with Somali fraud of welfare programs in Minnesota, which looks just outrageous, but marry it to a positive agenda of restoring the melting pot idea and assimilation, which they don't make enough of. And I think look, I am not with the Trump administration, how vigorous they've been in the internal enforcement of the immigration laws. And I think they're starting to lose votes. The one thing, this does go to the midterm point. It does seem, I do think it's still early, but it does look like the Latino vote is not returning back to the Republican Party the way they did for Trump's election. I think that
I'm not buying
has a
those
lot
polls.
to do with, it probably has a lot to do with the immigration enforcement.
Well, we'll see. But the old days, how did assimilation work when you had high rates of immigration from what were thought, by the way, to be undesirable populations in the 1890s and up to 1924? Poles, Italians, Romanians.
How about this?
Well, let me
Jefferson.
finish. No, let me finish for a minute. And how was that done? It was done by those big city machines that say, okay, we're going to help you out. You vote for us and you take orders, right? There's the confidence. I mean, never mind how corrupt Tammany Hall might have been. That was the kind of corruption that worked in a certain way. And that's what the country doesn't have anymore. And especially the Democratic Party, who ought to be good at this, does not have anymore at all. In fact, quite the opposite.
Well, they don't believe in it.
They don't believe in it. Exactly. It's worse than not believing it. They're against it.
They should have listened to Jefferson, who, by the way, warned that we shouldn't even be letting in immigrants from European countries who had
like
absolute monarchies. He said, nothing can be more opposed than the maxim of absolute monarchies, yet from such we are to expect the greatest number of immigrants. They will bring with them the principles of government they leave, imbibed in their early youth, et cetera, et cetera. And if they are able to throw them off, it will be in exchange for an unbounded licentiousness. This is not a new debate. What I think is new is the way one of you just said it, which is that the Democrats are opposed to the idea of forcing assimilation, not so much to our culture. I think that one of the things that we have done exceptionally well is embrace lots of culture. You know, I can still tell you some of my Swedish culture that you grew up in, you know, the grandparents who immigrated here from Sweden. John obviously has that whole K-pop demon hunter culture thing going for him.
In fact, it was Steve that made me watch K-pop Demon Hunters. I would not watch it because I'm Korean high culture, not Korean low culture.
I got it. But the point is that that's not necessary to destroy those aspects of culture that are not in any way undermining the more important things, like understanding the principles of free government. And that's how many places are there are they trying to enforce Sharia law? In Texas, of all the god-awful places, can you imagine? And so I think that I'm being extreme because, like Trump was being extreme. I really believe that. I mean, Trump, person to person, doesn't have a mean bone in his body. I believe, but we can't go on and let the Jayapals and the Tim, whatever his name is, phrase of the world be setting our agenda here on these things, or the Tim Waltzes. Oh wait, I have one. I have to get and then I'll move on to our more important one.
Can I mention here an additional theme? This is my running theme for these stories. Is once again the media. The New York Times has been surprising about this. Their story this week was, rampant welfare fraud. Welfare fraud among the Somali community under Governor Waltz's watch. That was their headline. And first of all, why the Times ignored the story for 4 or 5 years? I mean, this has been known for a while. Scott Johnson's been writing about this forever.
On it, John Hendricker,
and John and others, and Rufo and the City Journal people. And why did the Times do a big story on this? Well, I'm not sure why, but a headline like that is very damaging when you put it that way. And headlines are important in this world. Quick story. I should try and find this whole thing. Back in 2007, I think it was, I did my own little 45-minute movie refuting Al Gore's, whatever his climate change movie was, An Inconvenient Truth. Mm-hmm. And the long story how, but we conned the New York Times into doing a culture piece about a screening in San Francisco. And the headline in the New York Times, it was at like page 10, it wasn't front page, was, finally a faux for Gore. And it had my picture and it told about the movie and described me. I was large then as being
watched
big
the movie,
bone.
Steve.
Right, okay. So the whole thing. Well, the interesting thing was the Times got flamed over the headline. And so the early edition had, a faux for Gore at last, right? By the afternoon, that headline had been scrubbed from the online version and changed to something more anodyne. Film critical of Gore shows that some little. And the point is, headlines are really important, and the fact that the time that is not lost on Times editors. So the fact they went with that very damaging headline to Tim Waltz, I think, is also a sign that there's something up with the media.
Okay, well. There's something up with Tim Waltz. He's very upset because Trump called him the R word. And believe it or not, the reason I think this is so funny is because this has been a thing in my house. One of the little college students around here said, "You can't use the R word in front of me." Oh my God, was she sorry she said that? I'm just going to leave it that.
I can imagine.
That is so gay and retarded. Sorry. But this is Waltz. This creates danger. Trump calling him a retard. People are driving by my house and using the R word. This is shameful. But he's actually saying that Trump calling him a retard and other people then driving by his house and using the R word, oh my God, the R word, is going to create danger and violence because that's what it leads to. The R word.
So are we not allowed to say retarded?
Or gay. No, you can't say gay and retarded.
Well, yeah. You can say gay if you're part of the official, the Hominturn, as I call it.
Sorry. I spent too much time with you.
It took you a second, John. You finally got it, right?
That's funny.
Look, Trump does this on purpose, not to be mean, but for a good reason. I mean, just stick with Gulf of America. Right? This is outrageous. Gulf of America. This is ridiculous. Well, the left has been renaming things for the last 10 years. We renamed not all of them, we renamed several military bases because the people
Lots
were
of them.
bad. So I think this is Trump fighting back against politically correct speech and the way the left is trying to define and constrain our political discourse by saying what words and concepts we could and couldn't use. So, forget retard for a moment for Waltz, which, by the way, kind of applies. I mean, that guy is really a doofus. But he said, we don't want immigration from third world countries. You're not supposed to say third world countries anymore. He said,
Really? I say that all the time in class. I didn't know.
Well,
nobody told me
yeah,
that.
but people know that you're a, retrograde or something like that. Oh,
Yeah.
He also uses the word illegal immigrant. Remember, for years now, it's been, no, we call them undocumented immigrants, not illegal immigrants. And actually, this week, the person who really slammed the reporters on this was Governor Florida. I'm blanking on his name. DeSantis. He said, I've been saying this for years, but finally you hear a Republican politician saying this. Wait a minute. That's not an accurate term. An awful lot of the people in the country have documents. They have visas and other conditional documents that were given that they're in violation of. That makes them what? In violation of the law. Hence, illegal immigrants. That's a precise term.
No person is illegal,
right?
Steve.
Of course, no human being's illegal, right?
Sorry, I know we're short on time, but this is the best story. I'm in this
go ahead,
city leadership thing, and we go visit, believe it or not, we go visit the city landfill refuse center to learn how it all works. Okay. And so then we're in this little seminar and the guy's talking and he talks about how one of the biggest problems for waste management in the county here is the amount of trash left behind by undocumented. He says. And he says something like on the order of, I'm going to make it up, 500 tons a year of trash they collect from the desert left behind by undocumented workers. And I turned to the person next to me, but loud enough for everybody to hear. I said, isn't it interesting how they can document the trash of undocumented workers?
Oh, that's funny. Well, I have said for a long time that
I got
nomenclature.
kicked out.
Oh, did you? Oh, good for you. Well, I've had a sort of a joke about this for a long time, except it's not a joke, of course, which is nomenclature rules these things. So, we never cared about the jungle until it became a rainforest. We never worried about the dump until it became a landfill. And we never worried about the swamp until it became a wetland, which needs to be preserved, right? So we do those kind of euphemisms. Euphemisms rule us. And again, this is why Trump says, to hell with all that. And I think he does that on purpose. And I think he's calculated that. I think he's absolutely right. And no one else seems to get it, except, as I say, DeSantis gets it to some extent.
And Lucretia.
Well, yes, but
because she does the same thing.
She was there years before all of them.
That's true.
Right. Okay, so we're running out of time because these guys have really important lives and they have places to be. But we do have one last topic that, in order to keep on our schedule of discussing things related to the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, we do want to put a bunch of these things in the perspective. And I think we did a halfway decent job so far about talking why it is immigrants, they can keep their culture, assuming, again, it's not a malicious, horrible culture, but they have to assimilate by believing what. Have you guys ever taken the citizenship test just for the fun of it?
I did a few years ago. I looked at the questions. They're kind of
Questions are
tough
pretty good.
I think a lot of Americans couldn't pass it.
Yeah, I know. I would always give it in my American government classes, and I would rarely have a student who could pass it at the beginning, and then I'd give it to him again at the end.
And then the scores were worse.
No, they actually were. Actually, the funny thing was, I would have the local political reporter from the San Bernardino Sun would come and we would do it together, and he would write about it pretty much every quarter in the quarter system. So anyway,
don't give it at UC San Diego.
Oh God.
We haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah, let's tell it quick, because I think I can pull it in.
No, I mean a shocking number of UC San Diego freshmen can't even do middle school math.
Yeah,
have to take. They're offering these huge remedial classes in algebra. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and UC San Diego is not a community college. You have to actually
Yeah.
qualify to get in. It's merit based, or
Yeah.
supposedly.
No, it's a very strong science and technology
Yeah.
campus. I mean, they've got several Nobel Prize winners there.
Yeah,
They have the ugliest library in the world, but never mind that. Okay.
but the nicest beach. So there you go.
That's true.
UCSB might have something to say about that. Anyway.
Oh, okay, all right. Most beaches in California are still beautiful, Steve. It's just the Russ Estate that sucks these days, you know. And not the land is still beautiful. So how do we push the idea? This is, I think, actually very important. I'm going to leave aside because we're not going to have time. We are going to pick it up next time. Steve wants to discuss the issue, which I think is the other side of the question of post-liberalism and our friends on the right who want to reject the very things that our friends like Somalis and our idiot former president Obama. This is what I mean. He really believes that it's the fact that we don't all look alike that this makes this country exceptional. Remember, he's the same idiot who, when asked about it as president, when asked what he thought American exceptionalism meant, he said, "Well, I think America's exceptional, just like I'm sure France thinks they're exceptional." And he's just so
He never saw The Incredibles, did he? Yeah. Yeah.
But
Right. When everybody's special, no one is. Right.
But
Yeah.
if you're the president of the United States and you do not know the basic principles that make America truly exceptional, that's a really, really, that's a huge indictment, if you ask me. And I believe it is what drives, especially the left. We'll keep it to the left for today because we don't have time to hound our friends on the right. That they don't understand what the true meaning of equality is, and they have usurped the true meaning of equality that came from the Declaration, turned it into something that the right, some people at least on the right, are quite willing to say we want to reject. Does that make sense? I'm probably going too fast on this. So you take it over.
Well, I can't. I mean, there's too much to unpack there. But let's just do like half of a whole episode on this. And
next week, let's do post-liberalism next week
and
then tie it in with this.
Yeah. And, do the leftists. And Lucretia, you bait me. This is really bad. This is okay. Well, let's go to a close.
With 3 minutes left in the podcast.
I know, right?
She's a genius. She's genius.
I'm going to be twitching all night. I got to pour another whiskey here. Okay, sorry, Lucretia. Go ahead.
It's okay if we have 3 minutes. Again, we'll pick it up next time, and we'd be happy to see some comments about that. I got some specific comments about different things that I actually addressed in this podcast. So I'm hoping people.
Here's what I'll do. I'll do a post on our political questions Substack saying, here's what's on our mind. I've been meaning to write an item about this because of questions I've been getting from people. So I'll write something and flag it for people, and then we'll use it next week.
Okay.
But now we need Babylon Bees, and then I've got a clincher for you from the okay, good.
The Babylon Bee sometimes reads my mind. What can I say? Or simpatico, or the Vulcan Mind, and whatever it is. Black Hawk Down remake to be filmed in Minneapolis.
I was hoping you could use that one.
Man. Oh man!
January 6th, bombing suspect disinvited from FBI Christmas party this year.
Oh, that was even better. Oh, those guys are on a roll.
Oh man!
American patriots in Minnesota paint their doorways red, white, and blue so that ICE will pass over their houses. That's not. You'll like this, Steve. Minnesota Vikings changed name to Minnesota Somali Pirates.
Yeah, right. I saw that one too. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay.
There's just one last one. Sorry, I lost it. Government accidentally shuts itself down with ban on non-essential businesses. Sorry, I think that was old, but we get
it. Right. Okay.
Oh, what last one? Ilhan Omar argues she should be able to stay in horrible country she hates.
Ah, yeah.
There is the encapsulation of my whole point today.
Yeah, right.
So, all right. Your turn, John.
Always drink your whiskey neat buy more books. And Steve, what is the latest command from your AI overlords?
Yeah, so I have a whole bunch of them, but the one I'm going to use here is I asked AI to give us a sort of a script of Sydney Sweeney listening to the Three Whiskey Happy Hour. And I'm just going to give you part of it.
Just obsessed with this Sydney Sweeney.
No, it's a. Did you see the news this week, by the way, that American Eagle Outfitter stock has soared because of her endorsements? And I said, if you're an inside trader, you want to find out what products she's going to endorse next. Okay, I'm just going to give you a portion of this. I think it's very good. She's in her Sydney Sweeney's in her kitchen listening to the podcast. Lucretia's voice came in sharp, dry, and amused. Already mid-analysis of some historical parallel no one else would have thought to make. Sydney paused mid-sip of her coffee. Okay, who is this woman? She whispered to no one. Lucretia delivered a jab wrapped in academic vocabulary. Sydney snorted, nearly choking on her matcha. She leaned against the island, crossing her arms, listening harder. Sydney let out a laugh that bounced around the empty kitchen. Damn, she's bold. And she go, I'm going to skip a little bit. She's like your smartest friend who starts arguments at dinner parties on purpose, Sydney said to her dog, who had wandered in and flopped at her feet. The podcast continued. When the episode ended, she stared at the speaker for a beat. Okay, Lucretia, she murmured with a smile. You're kind of badass. She hit the play next episode button. I like that.
Nicest compliment I've had all day, Steve.
Well, hey, look, I know what I want to do if I want to stay on your good side. So, all right, bye-bye, everybody.